Okay, one of the important roles of a board chair can be to be part of the interview process for a principal's appointment. And sometimes that can also extend out to being on the panel for assistant principals as well. The first thing to clarify is it is preferred that it is the board chair who is on the panel. However, at times board chairs may not be available, so therefore someone from the board who is selected in consultation with the board and the current principal. But a few things that we need to be very clear on is what is the role of the person on the panel. Now, there are a number of people who will be part of the panel. The parish priest, or the priest who's most closely associated with the school or college. There will also be the board chair, of course. We'll have the Director of Catholic Education, the Assistant Director, and then the P&F President. No person on that panel is more important or holds more sway. Everyone has an equal vote and an equal say in the whole process. So one of the things that's important to remember is that it is an equal process and that we will reach some form of decision through a consensus model. Before we actually get to the interviews for the principal or the person who's being interviewed, there'll be a pre-meeting of the whole panel. Now that could be via a telephone conference, or it may be that the AD Schools rings each person on the panel and just talks them through the whole process and make sure everyone's feeling comfortable about it. There will also be the requirement for the board, before we get to the interview process, to come up with a qualities document. In other words, what does the board believe are the qualities they are looking for the new principal of the school or college or the new assistant principal? That process will also happen with the P&F and with the school staff. And it's just simply everyone sitting down and brainstorming and coming up with what are the common things that we are looking for in a principal. Hopefully we're looking for someone like a person of faith, a person with commitment to the Catholic Church, and then the personal qualities you may want. You know, integrity would be one of them, for example. Once that is then submitted to the AD Schools, the process starts with looking at the timeline and a date for the initial meeting. Now, the role of the panel is really only sitting there to make a recommendation to the bishop. It does not make the final decision. It is there to discern from the number of applicants who the panel thinks is the most suitable, and then for the director to take that forward to the bishop for his imprimatur and appointment. Panel membership, we've spoken about. The panel is chaired by the AD Schools. The director has made the decision not to chair the panel, and basically it allows them to step back and thoroughly observe the whole process, to listen very carefully without having to worry about how do we go, where are the questions going to. The interview starts, or the process, when everyone meets, usually for about half an hour beforehand. Lisa will make some opening comments, and they will be around the confidentiality and how important it is that really we have to respect all the applicants for the process, and then also we have to acknowledge that whatever decision we make will be a decision that will change the school or college, but also will be a life changer for that person. So confidentiality is very important. Lisa will also talk about how shortlisting was done. And in many of our processes, we will have to shortlist from a group of 5 or 6 applicants down to 2 or 3. So Lisa will make some comments then around about how many were shortlisted, how many applicants we received, what was the process for then discerning who made it through the interview. Then next there'll be a discussion about referee reports. So before you get to the interviews, you will receive a pack which will have all the applicants of the people who are being interviewed and all their referee reports. The AD schools will also have contacted every person who was a referee, just to check, is there anything else they wanted to say that they didn't feel they could put in writing or that they may have forgotten to put down. So it's just a little check that we go through to just make sure that everyone's comfortable with what they put on their referee reports. The whole interview is really not an interview as many jobs are. It is more a conversation. There will be a set of questions supplied, and we would talk about those questions before we start the interviews. The questions are fairly generic. There would be some there the board chair may want to ask about, the person's knowledge of school boards. If they've been a principal before, how have they worked on a school board? What's their understanding of the school board movement? And particularly if they're coming from outside our diocese, what's their understanding of our own diocesan model? The interviews usually go for about 30 to 45 minutes. And as I said, as a conversation, usually starts with a question fairly generic. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what's led you to make this application. Now, at that point, people are listening because that's where you start to get your next question. The person may say something about, I got onto the college website and I looked at these things and I felt comfortable with the values. Well, the parish priest may come in and talk about, what are the values that you hold dear, both from a faith perspective and a work perspective? So even though we have the set of questions, it's really a conversation that should flow from what the person has said, and we're wanting clarification or a little bit more information or asking them to share some more on a certain aspect. Now, the whole process then, at the end of doing all the interviews, we sit down and we talk through what did we hear? What were the positives that we heard from each person? What were the areas that we may have had a concern with, or we wanted to get the panel's view of a certain thing they may have spoken about? Once we've done that, everyone's asked to think about who is their first preference. Who is the one they felt most comfortable about for this position? Then usually the chair or Lisa will go round and ask each person what they thought. Now, usually it's the parish priest is asked first, and then the board chair, the PNF president, Lisa and the AD schools give their opinion last. Now, most times you will get everyone going for the same person. But there are times where we're looking at it and going, okay, 3 people have felt person A, 2 people have felt person B, and so we'll talk through the whole process again. What did we hear? What did the group of 3 really like about person A? What did the group of 2 think about person B they were looking for? Talk it through and keep talking, usually for about another 30, 40 minutes, about who do we think the best person is. At those stages, we'll go back to the quality sheets. What did the PNF want? What did the board want? What did the staff want? Which person is best suiting those qualities and the qualities we as a panel feel is appropriate? Usually, we will then have some form of consensus. But if we haven't, it may be we stop our meeting and we have a day or 2 to think it through. And then usually by teleconference, we'll speak again about what we think. Has anyone changed their mind? And we keep going till we get to a point where we have got consensus. I have never been on a panel where we haven't reached consensus. But there could be a time where 4 people on the panel think one person and one person is still undecided and going for someone else. In those sorts of circumstances, then the equality that I talked about earlier does change, and usually the director will make some form of decision or recommendation to the panel that this is really what she thinks needs to be done. Once the consensus has been made, it's Lisa's role then to go to the bishop and to make a recommendation as to this is the person the panel thought was best for the position. The bishop then either accepts or can say no for whatever reason they have, and they may have information that we as a panel don't have. I haven't been involved in a process where we've said no, or the bishop said no, but there could be a time when that happens. I would suggest then the panel would reconvene and we would look at who was our second option, and we'd go through the same consensus process, recommendation to the bishop, and see what happens from there on in. Now, once we've got the bishop's acceptance of the person, then Lisa usually has the great joy of ringing the successful person, who is always very excited and appreciates getting that phone call, but also has the unenviable job of then ringing the unsuccessfuls and letting them know. In the process of letting unsuccessfuls know, it's important that while we will always give the director our reasons as to why we thought a particular person was suitable or wasn't suitable, we tend not to give direct feedback as to you didn't get it because of. Simply, the reason might be, you might say to someone, well, this person had better, or the person who was successful had better academic qualifications. They may have had a master's in education, a master's in business administration. If you give that sort of feedback to people, when they reapply, what do you think they're going to have done? They've gone and done their master's in, or they have fixed up the area that was an area of concern, or they have worked on their presentation style. What happens the next time? They're unsuccessful, supposedly again, but I worked on what you said was wrong. So it's far better not to give specific feedback and just give a general feedback. You know, the panel thought that another person was the stronger applicant at this stage, so we keep it fairly generic. And once again, the whole thing is very confidential. So once the panel disbands, we don't talk to anyone about the decision that's been made other than the people who are on the panel. It's a simple process, it's an interesting process, it's quite informal in one sense, in that it is a conversation and not a set of, here are the 10 questions we are going to ask every applicant, because that limits us as to exploring. It's a formal process in that we're very cautious and careful with reviewing their application, looking at their referees, ringing their referees, and particularly in today's climate, the referee checks are very strong on things such as student protection matters, as well as their ability to perform in the role. So that's quite simply the whole process for appointment of a principal.